I see that you have some new stuff on your website, which is really exciting.
A lot of new stuff.
A lot of new stuff.
The website is esteemdynamics.com, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been talking about this a while, and we finally decided to go to the trouble of recording some new material and sort of laying down a bunch of fundamentals about evolutionary psychology and esteem processes, and also personality. So we got it all together, and then we got ourselves a web designer, and then we almost committed homicide.
Couple different times. It's been a process.
Yes. So it's like, what are we 2 months late, Jen? Something like that?
Oh, I think you're having some magical revisionism. I think it's more like 4.
But that's all right.
It's definitely it's much delayed according to our original timeline. But that means it's we've had time to add more stuff and do more with it than we thought we could. And one of the reasons that we're not doing the podcast live anymore is because a couple times a month we're doing live Q&As on this new website. A bunch of new stuff. There's in addition to the fundamentals that Doug just mentioned, there are never before seen lectures on other topics and newsletters and book reviews forthcoming, and just a ton of different stuff. So it's a new compendium and landing space for everything that we're doing.
And I know Dr. Lisle, Dr. Hawk, you're too humble to promote the pricing, but it is incredible. It's like $3 a month if you wanted to do it monthly, but if you wanted to do a lifetime membership, it's $99, which is like, that's less than a session with you guys.
Well, and it's $99 for a lifetime, which it puts you on the list
plus a book
for our book. Yeah, so you'll get an autographed copy of our book when it's released next year for that $99, which includes international shipping for our international listeners. I've had that question a few times. So no matter where you are in the world, that's part of the deal. So yeah, we've had a lot of people tell us that it's underpriced, but we really, really wanted to not try to skewer people on this. We're really genuinely trying to get it out to as many people as possible and just kind of cover our own expenses. And so I think we've done that, and it's a very exciting time, very exciting to hatch it into the world.
Yep. So we'll see what happens.
It's marvelous, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
We're well along on the book that we're writing, and we have. I'm always looking forward to the next paragraph that Jen writes, because it's always better than anything that I could write. So we're on our way, and we're going to keep chiseling away, and next year we'll have something hopefully really exciting for folks. All right, Nathan. Well, let's go on. Let's get to the show and get to some questions.
Fantastic. All right. Our first question has to do with coronavirus, which just seems like just so long ago compared to everything else, but I guess we'll just take it. So, dear doctors, I'm a hyper-conscientious nutcase. I consider myself the 95th percentile for conscientiousness, but I don't relate at all to Dr. Lisle's statement that hyper-conscientious nutcases are more likely to be over the top with wearing masks, washing hands, etc., for fear of the COVID-19 infection. In fact, I suspected that the risk of the virus had been exaggerated from very early on, suspicions that were fed by following John Ioannidis' work. I think I may have channeled my high conscientiousness into reading every article on the virus that I could get my hands on to ensure that my understanding was accurate. I'm also 90th percentile for agreeableness and normally avoid doing anything that might upset others. But I find myself getting so irritated with other people's compliance with ridiculous and non-evidence-based social distancing rules, which has, like staying 6 feet away, which has zero evidence of efficacy, that I now make sarcastic comments in public whenever I see people wearing masks or dutifully standing on crosses in the supermarket queues. Frankly, I now hold most people in utter contempt for continuing to fear the virus, which is quite foreign to me as I've always felt very compassionate towards the human condition and all of its foibles. What is happening to me? Is this some sort of situational disagreeableness, or is there another explanation? And how do the other big variables play into this? I'm 90th percentile openness, I'm mid-range extroversion, and stability, which maybe could be modifying factors.
Well, how about it, Jen? Dr. Hawk?
I think we have a lot of listeners who fit this kind of personality archetype to some degree. I've heard versions of this from a lot of people. And there are a couple of different things here that definitely you're not as agreeable as you think you are. It's situational disagreeableness for sure, but see, the disagreeableness can only manifest to the capacity that it's permitted by the nervous system. So it was always there. It just never had the right context before, and now it's found that context. So I know a lot of people who can relate to this. And your high conscientiousness is a lot of people will kind of lump themselves in with a certain percentile on conscientiousness because it's what the test tells them that they are. It's what they've self-identified as. But I really find, I always go back to Jordan Peterson's disaggregation of conscientiousness in particular to better understand it, because I think it's really helpful, which is that it's both what we always call on this show conscientiousness is encompassing several different personality traits. It's a big bucket for a lot of different things, and so you can be super conscientious in some ways and not really in others. And Peterson in particular breaks it down into industriousness and orderliness. So when you think about those two things, they're quite different. And I usually, when I take a personality test, I'm very rate is very highly conscientious, but I'm much more industrious than I am orderly. I'm not particularly orderly. Like my house is a mess, and my car is a mess, and my notes are a mess. But I'm quite industrious. So if there's a new topic that I want to learn about, or there's a pressing deadline that I need to finish, or there's a pile of work that I need to do, I'm very conscientious when it comes to that. So I think when you're observing that you're not behaving like the typical conscientious person, we've been painting that with a very broad brush. The hyper-conscientious nut cases would be the people most embracing the recommendations of distancing and mask wearing and everything. That's much more an orderliness kind of characteristic than an industrious one. So you're seeing the manifestation of just a different flavor of conscientiousness is a large part of what's going on for you. And then I think, the situational disagreeableness, which is you're in a little bit of a perceived position of power. You're feeling a little superior to the people that you're watching as the sheeple who are not as well read and don't have the same amount of information that you perceive that you do, which is contributing to that level of contempt that you're feeling, filtered through the little skittles of disagreeableness that exist in your personality. And as you were rightly pointing out in the question, you're not super high on stability, so you're more subject to being blown around by this if you're mid-range, and you're very high in openness, which is also driving your irritation, that your movement and exploration of the world is being constrained in ways that it shouldn't be. So I don't think anything unusual is happening to you at all. It's just your personality interacting with a very unusual environment, and I think a lot of people are in that boat.
Yeah. I would probably, if I put myself in this person's shoes, there's maybe one other little chip that's being activated, and or one other little concept, and that is that when you know more than they know, and they're all following somebody else like a bunch of lemmings, then it's irritating because you are not getting enough status. So you're feeling the status deficiency, like, look, I'm not only smarter than you, but I'm smarter than the people that you're following. So this is like ridiculous, okay? And so that's another little anger. It's you sit there feeling moderately insulted by the fact that your greater abilities are not being recognized. So yeah, that's beautiful. That's a. Yeah, so they're good. Well, yeah, I tend to feel these kinds of things a lot.
I definitely relate to the comment about standing on the squares at the supermarket. That's the thing that gets me. Like, I can roll with the rest of it, and it's I'm totally fine, and I'm not that irritated. But standing perfectly flush with the little masking tape square at the supermarket to be exactly 6 feet behind the person, that does. I definitely exert my tiny rebellion by stepping just outside the designated square.
A little silent protesting.
That's right. That's the range of my disagreeableness.
Now, Dr. Lisle, Dr. Hawk, would you expect, or how, if we changed the parameter or added a parameter of someone being single, i.e. they're competing for mates, and so they're losing time by having to close their face off and having, can't really do the competition that they used to. Would you expect that they might be more irritated than someone who's married and happy or with a soulmate, and they're not as concerned with that competitive aspect?
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
Sure.
Could be true.
Yeah.
Sure. That any number of little details like that could add up. I've had an entertaining thing watching because two people close to me, I don't know what this is, but it seems like anybody anywhere near my circle has got a screw loose. So
hey,
Jen will know who I'm referring to. So two people close to me are OCD, and one of them is completely OCD about COVID, and there's no sort of talking the OCD anxiety out of her, and wearing the mask around. Yeah, if I run into her, she wants to know if I've been wearing my mask. This is all. And then I've got another one, our other friend, Larry, that we will sometimes mention by name. He's ambivalent because he's got this independent disagreeable streak. At the same time, he's also OCD about germs. So this guy is totally bouncing. He's a ping pong ball about all the COVID issues. And so in 1 minute, he's worried that the world's not getting clean enough, and the next he's irritated that he's being constrained. So it's been an entertaining thing for me to watch, but this does not necessarily have to fall along political lines or anything else. That just sheer personality issues are this is the Rorschach test for a lot of that, and that's what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Just wonder. Well, maybe we'll see how long it lasts and whether the second wave requires us to do even more.
We might have to consult somebody that knows a tremendous amount about infectious disease.
Yeah, I know. Do we know anybody like that? I know we had someone on recently that everybody freaking loved.
We've got him on call.
We do. Well, we might at some point.
Let me go get my broccoli. Let's see what happens.
We might want to could we use a 5-minute COVID update about what we should be thinking and feeling right now, or what do we feel like?
Well,
let me see. I just got some broccoli here, and I'm rubbing it, but I don't know. I was told it would do something, but.
All right, let's go on to another question.
All right, our next question. Dear Doug, Jen, and Nate, I am finishing up a PhD in philosophy at Cambridge University in the UK. I research moral exemplarity and am writing a lecture series in which I hope to include an evolutionary psychological perspective. Dr. Lisle has spoken in the past about how the way to bring people over to a whole foods, plant-based diet way of life is to evince humility in the way you present the benefits, like seems to be working for me. This got me wondering about how people in the so-called Stone Age village would tolerate exemplars in their midst. How do esteem dynamics operate between a perceived exemplar and their spectators? Is posturing like a Pyrrhonian skeptic the most effective way to get people to listen to and follow your example?
Complicated question filled with words that I don't know by some PhD candidate at Cambridge in philosophy. So this is all great. I'm actually glad to hear that someone who's made this a study is interested in evolutionary psychology, since I believe that evolutionary psychology is the royal road to questions in philosophy. So I believe that probably very few philosophers are aware of that or know that. Some of them do. But I think that this person's probably in the minority and is at the cutting edge now of what will be 21st century philosophy. A way to think about social problems is to be careful that we know exactly where we're trying to head. This is what we call begin with the end in mind. So I give an example of this. When I worked in the prisons, the prisoners would be called up for parole. And this is a big deal because they might only get one shot every 3 years or 5 years. And they'd be called up for parole. And what would happen in parole hearings is that if the person had a very, very good record, remember, before people get scandalized that anybody would ever get out on parole, remember that a lot of people are not even eligible for parole. So there are people that are eligible for parole, and if they have a bad record, there's no way they're getting out. If they have an exemplary record in the prison, they're supposed to be considered for parole appropriately. And so what will happen at these parole hearings very typically is the people that they send the hardest cases that there are, most disagreeable people imaginable to be the people in charge of these parole hearings. In other words, they may look nice and they may have decent social skills, but their attitude is, no deal, no dice. There are reasons why that's true that are beyond this discussion. However, what's going to happen is that they will know that somewhere in the brains of these parole reviewers, they will know that a man, it's almost always a man, since that's almost everybody that's incarcerated, they will know that the man, has an extremely strong case for being granted parole. And yet they're going to deny it. And they're going to deny it about 99% of the time. And so what they do in order to live with themselves is they bait the prisoner into losing their cool. And they will insult them and they will question them. And then if the prisoner gets a little emotional, they'll point out that they're getting emotional and therefore do they really think they're ready and don't they have more to work on? In other words, you would have to be some swami to be able to sit in there and not lose your cool. So what I told the prisoners was, you have to be very, very clear about what you're trying to accomplish. You have to either decide that you're going to use this as an opportunity to vent your spleen when they get nasty, you're going to get nasty back, and knowing that you're not going to get out because they're already signaling that you're not going to get out, and just go ahead and don't let them roll over you. And that will feel momentarily satisfying, although you'll have great cognitive dissonance because you'll know that you're just digging your own grave for another 3 or 5 years. The other thing to do, and what people do, is they try to hold on to it, and then they become demoralized. They try to be as civil as possible, and then they just kind of give up in great frustration, and they're beaten. They clearly lost their cool, and they go back to the prison yard just utterly demoralized and angry and just can't believe what happened. What I explained to the prisoners was, there's door number 3. Door number 3 is to understand that it's absolutely stacked against you, and it is not your job to vent your spleen one bit, because it's not going to do us any good. That the only key to the door is to keep focused on the prize and to know exactly what we're headed for. You cannot have 2 goals at once. In other words, feel a little bit better by standing up for yourself and not getting rolled over in the meeting. If you do that, you absolutely concede the biggest prize, which is a possibility of getting out. Okay, I would explain that you don't know that they're not going to grant you parole, even though they're insulting you and saying they won't. You don't know that it's not a test about how you're going to handle it. So in this way, we get very, very clear that this time, when we may run into people that are completely disagreeable and are not going to go our way, this is an opportunity to practice our techniques and perfect our performance. We're going to get the reviews. We're going to get the transcripts. We're going to find out what they said. Then we're going to see exactly what we said. Okay? And no matter how bad it gets, your job is to play this game as well as you could possibly play it. And we are playing with exactly one goal in mind. And that goal in mind is we're trying to get out of prison. Okay? If you let 1% of the other goal leak into your strategy, you're in trouble. So this is why sometimes the most important thing you do in this world, when you're under any complex problem at all, the most important thing is to figure out, what is it that I want the most? And almost all the time, in fact, the nature of life in general, is that your goals are inherently conflicted. The brain, in fact, was designed by nature as a conflict resolution device. What it is it's a mechanism for analyzing alternative values and threats and trying to come up with the best possible solution to the problem in a moment's notice. So it has design features. It has little integrated circuits in there that's what it's designed to do. If you're confused, okay, it's because the costs and benefits on either sides of the equations are pretty close. It's hard to know what the right decision is. Do you go left or you go to the right? Hard to know. In certain cases, we can know that we're going to get confused in the middle of a fight. But we actually have to keep our heads straight, and we have to know exactly where it is that we're going. This questioner has actually confused two different directions about what I'm trying to accomplish with the advice that I give people. I am not even close to being interested in convincing anybody else in the world to eat a healthy diet. Not interested. I'm interested in helping you figure out how you're going to do it in the face of a bunch of social pressure. That's what I'm interested in. If you already want to do it, I know that there's more people in this world that want to do it well and can't do it because of the obstacles. I got plenty to do just working with those people. Forget about the idea of trying to convince any new person that this is a good idea. There's plenty of people that already know that it's a good idea, that it's extremely tough for them to execute. So my strategies are completely directed at you who's wanting to make the changes and already know what you should be doing. So I couldn't care less about what anybody thinks about it. What I want to dial down all the pressure, all the esteem disturbances that are taking place there. That's what the humility is all about. That's what the SEAM strategy is about. This person says events. This person's using words I don't even know. Yeah, I'm trying to display. I know the word display. I'm trying to display humility. Because if I display humility, then I'm not going to get the pushback. Okay, now, so their goal, in theory, as they're thinking this through, is to say, well, wait a second, what if I'm trying to convince other people? That's a totally different goal. That is a completely different fork in the road. Okay, now we're going to look at the question from there. So now, how did they deal with people, who, if I'm displaying, in other words, if my behavior is superior in some way, but I'm signaling humility, that's not going to bother people. That's not going to hardly bother them at all. And so how did the Stone Age deal with people that were extraordinary in their sort of moral excellence in many ways? The answer is they were very well liked because they are signaling the humility and they're having behavioral excellence, which means that they're not causing a bunch of disturbance, that they are resulting in a minimum of conflict in that village. So that's not going to be a problem. Here's the problem. Not too far away from that is the individual who's saying, I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm better. That's different. That's not actually signaling humility and minding your own business and just doing a good job and not bugging anybody. No. That's trying to rub people's nose in it to try to convince them that they should follow your path. That's a whole different operation. And in that operation, what we're going to find is that those signals, no matter how subtle, those signals carry with them an issue that's problematic in the Stone Age, which is that the status pie in the Stone Age is a zero-sum game. So if I'm above, then you're below. And now we have a conflict of interest because this is costing you mating chips because I'm signaling my superiority. So how would you get people to change to a new direction? The answer is probably the very best way to do it is through humility. That's probably the best way to do it. With an open mind, with a questioning, to not take any credit for the fact that you're trying something new and it seems to be working for you. You're not sure it's going to work, but who knows? And then what would happen if you took that stance and you were careful with other people's esteem processes, what's going to take place is they will follow you when they see that you have success. That's how it works. So instead, what we have is most people falling into an extremely understandable trap when it comes to diet, health, lifestyle, etc., which is that, I just found out that this is a good idea. There was a charismatic speaker and leader that tells me that this is right. I believe them. And now I got to go tell my whole village and insist that I'm right and that I've got the new information. They got to give me a bunch of status. Well, when you do that, you can expect to get way worse results than you think you deserve. And that's because of the esteem processes that are being activated there. So, yeah, excellent question. And the answer is, the most important part of the answer is, figure out what is the most important value to you, and you must reverse engineer your behavior in order to match the most important goal that you seek. And that's how I look at that problem.
Dr. Lisle, thank you so much. I'm reminded of Dr. Hawk's quote a couple shows ago, where she said, "This is not the enterprise you should be engaged in reference to a female caller was trying to trick potential mates into thinking she was younger. But I've taken that and it's just great. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. Our next question. Dear doctors, do you have any advice on the gentlest way to break up with someone? I entered into a secret long-distance relationship with another woman close to 7 years ago when I was 23 and she was 30. We both haven't told our families about our relationship because we are related. We are cousins once removed and our families are very close. I also haven't come out to my family about this, and she's had trouble with her parents in the past because of her sexuality. I was a lot more open and naive at the time and didn't really think about the future viability of the relationship and just went with the flow. It was fun and loving. However, as I'm nearing 30, I'm thinking of the prospects of having children and a male partner that I can introduce to my family and friends. I also find myself not attracted to her as I once was. She's living and working in an environment that is not conducive to health, and she's become more overweight and sickly throughout the years. I feel terribly shallow in saying that because she's a wonderful person who I still care for, and I worry about how she will take it when I finally do find the nerve to break up with her. Any insights would be greatly appreciated, and thank you all for your amazing work.
Your turn.
Yeah, well, I can jump in on this one unless you have anything
Sure.
to throw out there, Doug. Yeah, I mean, this is a really hard situation. This is, there's nothing really, even though it's an unusual relationship and unusual circumstances, there's nothing specific about advice about how to break up with this person that is unique to your situation, that's really different from the advice that we would give anyone who's in a difficult breakup where they don't want to hurt the other person, and it's just that your cost-benefit analysis on the relationship has changed over time, which it almost always does. So, you know, we have that wonderful, cheerful phrase that marriage is a lifetime decision with a 5-year warranty or a 5-year chip, and that's what you've experienced here, is that you sort of got into this, didn't marry the person, but sort of got into it with your youthful naivete, thinking that it would be forever, because no reason not to think that it wouldn't be, and everything was great at the beginning, and then slowly over time you've just your interests are not aligned like they once were. You're not attracted like you once were. It's a lot of secrets to keep. It's a lot of stress in this relationship that is an affordable cost-benefit analysis when it's exciting and new, but not so much when it's not. And so you've had this very organic decay function on this relationship, which is not unique to the fact that it is among cousins once removed and a queer relationship. Like, those are just characteristics of it that make it sort of. So there's nothing specific to the fact that that this is a sort of inter-family relationship or that it's a queer relationship. It's just a relationship that's run its course, and so it's never a pleasant thing to be the one who wants to end that relationship. And it's you obviously don't want to hurt her. You still love her a lot and value a lot about her. So this just goes back to all of the kind of core techniques that we have, and there's nothing magical about them. There's no special sauce in them. These are things that are tropes in the culture, which are that you're gonna flood the circuits as much as possible. We have advice about how to do this on the website, specific videos and audio about how to do this. Essentially, really letting her know everything that you value about her, and doing so in a very specific way that is not just vague compliments, but really naming specific things that you appreciate about her and value, and all of the things that are important to you in this relationship, and then just very as gently as possible standing in your truth in the relationship and telling her that this is where you are, and not trying to manipulate it, and saying that you're in a different place, and the sort of some version of it's me, not you. There's really no other way to do this. It's just never going to be an easy road to walk. And we do have a couple of little videos about or audios about some scripts that you can adopt to try to make it a little easier. But the main thing to keep in mind is that that the sort of notion that you don't want to do this because you don't want to hurt the other person is a confusion. Like you are not preventing her from being hurt by staying in the relationship. You were preventing her from finding the person that she's supposed to be with, who would be in a mutually over rewarding, satisfying relationship. So not only are you not doing her any favors by staying in a relationship that you don't want to be in, and obviously short circuiting your own happiness in the process, and the kind of relationship that you know that you want, which is not this, but you are preventing her from experiencing the end of this relationship and going out and finding somebody who really will be the best possible match for her. So that's the perspective just to keep in mind throughout the whole thing, that you have to do her the kindness of allowing her to hate you a little bit, and you have to be courageous enough and brave enough to be hated as part of that trade to allow both of you to find the relationships that you both deserve and want.
Dr. Hawk, thank you so much.
Yeah. Beautiful. Good.
Yeah, I don't know if Doug has anything else to add to that, but
yeah. No. And their pain is way shorter than you think. As a clinical psychologist, I for 35 years, I've been watching these recurrent dramas in human nature, and we expect it. We have an egocentric bias that the loss of us is going to be this crushing, all the scaffolding of their existence is going to crumble. The truth of the matter is that they already lost us a long time ago, and they already know it, and they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so it's in ways, it's the most important and liberating relief when they have to deal with it. They have a couple of bad weekends, and they start to move on, and their life gets better. So their life probably is a lot better in 6 weeks than it is the one that they're in. They have to go through some pain to get there, but it's a move for the positive. It's the reduction of distortion, which is a very technical way of looking at it. But the truth is that the reduction of distortion in your body tissues or in your thinking, this is the way that life improves, is through essentially just the integration of the truth.
Wow. Now, one thing that I've when I was younger, when I get broken up with, I would want to know,
dumped,
what was the reason, right?
You mean dumped, right?
Yeah. Dumped, yes, dumped. Thanks a lot. Thanks for bringing it up. I'm traumatized now forever.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So when I would get dumped, I would be wondering like, why? Tell me the reason. And it was, the brain would say, well, so I can try to improve the display better, essentially, for next time, right? And then when I was doing the breaking up, when I was younger, it was like, I was like, well, I don't like being not told the reason. I don't like being, told the diplomatic thing. Oh, it's just not me, it's you. And so I would just tell girls the truth. And I didn't realize, and as I grew older, I was realizing you can't do that. That's not the way to do it. So, what's the deal there? What was my distortion? I've never figured it out.
Well, what did you do? What did you do for a living before you became a doc?
Electrical
engineer. Is an engineer.
An emotionless, uncaring. Data driven.
Yeah. I don't think we kind of need to dissect that tonight. The truth of the matter is, when someone is being rejected and they're hurt and they're losing, that's the last time to give them feedback. Okay? If there's any feedback ever to be given, it's by some other party, very gently saying, well, had you considered this and considered that? But no, the truth of the matter is that your subjective reasons why someone did no longer qualified are, they may be unique to you, at which point this is worthless, or they may not be unique to you, which is then the other person has other avenues to get that information, including their own brain. And everyone knows that there's a few parameters that you have to excel as best you can to qualify. That's just how it is. So, yeah, the rule is don't get specific about anything. In essence, there's plenty of truth in the issue is it's me, not you. In other words, whatever it is about me that happens to be about me, that happens to make it so that you aren't the right person for me, is really my problem. It's not your problem. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that is why there's truth in sitting right there on that strategy, and it's the appropriate strategy to use.
And just to clarify, it only happened like twice before I was like, oh no, this is the wrong strategy. Well, this is not a good thing.
And women will ask, and they'll get really insistent about it. Like, no, just tell me. I really want to know. Yeah. Like, tell me. And so the engineer mind will.
And then you tell them, and then
well,
they want to kill you.
If you really want to know, you've asked me 4 times, so I guess it means you're serious. So I best have better like, don't do it.
Even if they hold you up at gunpoint, Dr. Hawk, and say, tell me.
At that point, you appeal outside intervention.
That's when you tell them, you know what? The truth of the matter is you're just too young and too pretty.
Oh, come on. For God's sake.
I love that. Thank you, Dr. Lisle.
Where's my toxic masculinity barf emoji alarm?
All right. Let's roll it before I get in any deeper.
Yeah. All right. Our final question. Dear doctors, I am a 30-year-old male, and I honestly don't feel a very strong connection to my family. I grew up in a fairly toxic environment of alcoholism, and the whole experience has left me jaded towards the mainstream view of family. Would it make sense that different individuals would have different CBs when it comes to Hamilton's rule? Secondly, I have a very sweet girlfriend, but I recently told her I was hesitant about the idea of marriage because it seems like too big of a risk and not essential to have a meaningful relationship with someone. Her response to this and the feelings about family has been to suggest I go to therapy to deal with my childhood issues. How do I tell her that would be a waste of time?
Well, let's, Jen, please feel free to assist me in this. If it gets a little stern, we can first of all understand the young lady's perspective, because this sounds like probably a very good relationship and a serious relationship, and it sounds like they're of childbearing years, and so this is on this young lady's agenda potentially. And so, this is the guy that she wants to go down this direction with. So I'm guessing here, and I'm reading tea leaves a little bit, but she's all in on this guy. Now, he's looking at the situation, and he's running the cost benefit just like she is. And he also has a little bit of a history of seeing that that family life, just because it's family life, doesn't somehow make it a good life. So he's clear about this in possibly a way that she's not quite so clear. So we don't know quite what's running through her head. She may simply have a vision that really good guy, love this guy, like to sleep with this guy. Wouldn't it be neat to have a couple of kids and a house and, i.e., play out the domestic bliss strategy? So this is no surprise that this is where she would be. And if she had happened to have a bunch of agreeable, pleasant parents and siblings and had a wonderful family upbringing, then she's thinking, why on earth wouldn't we do this? This is exactly what I want to do. Okay. She's naive, of course. She doesn't understand that we're talking about making a 50-year decision with a 5-year chip. And so we can look at a vast majority of marriage partners 10 or 15 years later, and it is not a domestic bliss that they thought it was going to be. And that doesn't mean it's terrible. It just means it might be mediocre or okay or so-so, but people can be craving their freedom and wishing that they weren't roped into all the obligations and responsibilities that entails. And this guy can sniff it. Now, in terms of individual differences in running CBs on, basically, it's not just Hamiltonian. This isn't just relatedness coefficients. This is just the whole enterprise. It's all about this. So it's all about the marriage, the long-term marriage, the giving up of casual mating strategy, the giving up on not just casual mating strategy, but the possibility of meeting a better mate 5 years from now or 8 years from now. And now you have a set of circumstances where that becomes just exorbitantly expensive in many respects, and it really isn't going to be done. So this guy, the questions that I ask people like this, I have to say they wind up getting specific. In other words, how old are you? How old is the young lady? How long have you been going together? How happy are you in the relationship, and for how long have you been happy in the relationship? Okay, these are all critical parametric questions that speak to the intelligence of and the intelligence of how quickly we would move towards marriage and the hoops that the relationship would need to jump through before we would reasonably consider it. It could also be the case that the sort of tepid feeling he has about the idea may also be related to his own CB about this relationship itself. And that his own analysis of this, as he looks back through his nervous system and looks at his family, etc., and his, quote, lack of connection, that really this is a red herring and a possible smokescreen for what the truth is, which is what is his CB on this specific relationship with this specific young lady. Okay? So I can't answer the question in any other way than to tell you that in order to give you better advice, I would have to ask and answer these 20 questions. I'd have to understand what's going in to this entire package. What I would explain to her is that if you wanted to, I think the truth is that usually the way out of a mess is to get accurate. This is not a relationship we're trying to dump and try to throw up some octopus ink so that they can't see why, etc., of the question we just answered a few minutes ago. This is a different issue. This is two young people trying to play the game of life as intelligently as possible, optimize their happiness in the face of their evolutionary designs, which were not designed to make this work long term. So if you're going to do this, You want to go in eyes wide open and be is on the same team and is educated about how it is to deal with this. So I would actually make a deal with her, and that is that I'm happy to go to 5 sessions of counseling if you're willing to read The Evolution of Desire. Okay? So The Evolution of Desire is probably the most outstanding work in mating research and theory that there is, David Buss being the author. And so that book will open eyes wide open as to what the actual evolutionary underpinnings of the problem is that you're attempting to face. So, yeah, you're happy to use your insurance money and pay the copay. God forbid, don't pay cash for any psychotherapist. So you're glad to do that, and you will sort of talk through your issues and see whether or not the therapist can do that. That's worth 5 hours of your time and another 5 hours of the hassle of getting there and getting home. It's worth 10 hours to invest in this relationship if she's worth it, in order to see whether you can leverage and bargain with her about whether or not she's willing to spend that same 5 hours with David Buss. And this isn't to precipitate an argument. It's to precipitate an attitude of, hey, let's talk about what we're up against here. Okay? And she right now is not in a position to hear any discussion because she's not nearly educated. She's completely naive about her own psychology and the psychology and your psychology and how it all works. She is a believer in the domestic bliss strategy, which can happen if lightning strikes. It's not that it's impossible. It's just that where this relationship is right now between these two personalities, we're not there. And the question is, what can we learn about each other to help us plot a course to find out if we can get there? So we begin by getting both parties educated in what it is that we're really looking at. So that's one way to do it. Jen, I'm happy to ask for help. What else do you see, and what else comes to mind?
Yeah, it's an interesting suggestion to have her read The Evolution of Desire, because if she is sweet and naive as she's being kind of painted in this question, I have a little bit of concern that that's going to throw her for an enormous loop. Sort of all of the it raises a lot of questions, because I don't think that the issues are necessarily, she's not worried about cheating right now, but she might be after she reads The Evolution of Desire. As you're describing that, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is maybe not a great idea because she's going to flip out. It's going to cause a lot of unnecessary conflict. But on the other hand, that's just it's advancing that conflict in the relationship up to the point where it's coming up. I mean, you were essentially crystal clearing things that haven't had an opportunity to crystal clear themselves yet, which is what you would want to do before you would get married anyway. So no harm. I mean, you the overarching idea being that you don't want to be trying to stage manage each other in a relationship if it is a committed relationship that she wants to turn into a marriage, and you're resistant to for the family reasons and everything else, but no reason not to just get it all out on the table. So and you may discover, the other thing that came to mind when you were giving your answer was if you found a good cognitive behavioral therapist who could help you think through some of the distortion, if you did genuinely have some really crappy experiences as a child that have left you with this impression of family life always being an illusion and a terrible trial, it could be helpful. You may wander your way in those sessions into thinking about things in a new way and discovering some distortions in your own thinking that could surprise you with some benefits, and lead to new discussions with her that you haven't had an opportunity to have yet. So if there's goodwill and everybody is coming from the right place on this and really wants to go into an adult relationship that's very open and everything's on the table, then I throw everything you've got at it. No reason to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. I have another suggestion. I actually have another suggestion. And I sort of had this in the back of my mind, but I didn't say it because I've actually walked this road a number of times where I've had people call me. And so I'm I'm able to educate a disturbed spouse or partner in a way that it's of course threatening, but it can be gentle and educational, and we bounce our way through human natural history as we explain the human, essentially the human adventure, and how it is that people had to become the way they are today in order to solve the adaptive problems of our ancient history. And how it is that men and women have different sexual psychologies that can absolutely work together, but they are in often ways at cross purposes, and they're in evolutionary conflict to some degree. They're also in evolutionary cooperation, obviously. And so by what I attempt to do and what I can explain, I can do it better in person because I can watch facial expressions and know when I've stepped on a toe too hard. But this person could use myself or Jen, which Jen would be preferable, as a person for the partner to actually get some information and get some education here. Because the culture is steeled against and actually wants to stick its head in the ground like a bunch of ostriches and does not want to face this information. And so, i.e., you need to go to the therapist and work out your childhood issues. That's why you don't want to commit. Like, how classic is that? Right? So everything is wrong with that. The childhood issues are not having anything to do with the lack of commitment. And the lack of commitment, has mostly to do with the CB that this young man is running on this woman. That's the truth. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't love her and that she's not the best thing he might ever see, and she's the best thing he's seen up to date, and he's really enjoying her intersection of life with her, and he loves her. Okay? That doesn't mean he doesn't have cognitive dissonance about the idea of making a 50-year decision with a 5-year chip. And that doesn't mean he's jaded. It means he's a male with possibly a legitimate causal mating structures in there that still fire up and let him know it's there, because he's not a monogamous pair bonding female. Okay? And so the truth of the matter is that she is like the vast majority of people, born confused, living confused, and will die confused, and will never understand how it is that this works. And so instead, much better to find some intelligent assets like us, or anybody like us, or any readings, the Mating Mind, Evolution of Desire, etc., where a person can actually learn. Look at videos of David Buss, very articulate guy. The individual needs some essentially. What do you call that when you've been brainwashed? What do you do? Deconditioning?
Deprogramming?
I don't know. Deprogramming. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. The young lady needs to be deprogrammed a little bit. And in doing so, they might be able to face a future just with their eyes open instead of in quiet subterranean conflict and frustration.
All of that said, the
right.
I have childhood issues, so I can't commit to you is an excellent strategy for our previous question about how to break up. I've used it myself many times.
Yeah. This is like, what is it, like these card games that, what's the answer? You pick up a card and it answers the question in some funny way. Yeah, that's what it is. Cards. Yeah, this is precisely the card we use for that situation.
Totally,
it fits perfectly.
Totally.
So, Dr. Hawk, I have a question for you, which is, how would you expect a female to respond if this particular gentleman said that he's totally fine doing the marriage, the commitment, all that stuff, except for signing the government contract, which it seems from his question, that's where he says is too big of a risk. how do you expect her to respond to something like this, or a female?
Well, I don't think I'm the right person to answer on behalf of the fairer sex, because I myself, I'm so open that I would be delighted by that proposition. I'd be like, hell yeah, let's just have the party. And I know that a lot of women feel that way, but a lot of women do not. So it's really difficult to give just a general answer as far as, how women would feel, because I do think that those norms have changed fairly recently, where a lot of women feel like I do, where they want the display of the commitment to the village. They want to have the ceremony and the party and the registries, but the actual government paperwork is much less important to them. But for some women, it's extremely important, and for some. Sometimes there's some legitimacy to that for whatever reason. So, but yeah, I mean, it's worth, if that were a way to, if that is really his risk analysis and he's willing to kind of commit to her and have the party and just not legally bind himself, and she would be okay with that, certainly worth having that conversation and exploring whether that's a possibility that could work for both of them, because that solves a lot of problems at once.
And you are self-described as more open too, so maybe that.
Totally.
Now we see the personalities and pandemics and
sure.
Not pandemics, prenuptial contracts.
Prenuptial contracts.
Wait.
In pandemics. Yeah, I think openness. I mean, we've talked about this before, how I have many good friends that are in many non-traditional relationships of all types, and you just kind of don't know until you have whatever equilibrium bubbles up from the kind of core relationship at the center of that, to find out whether it's some sort of, there's some openness, there's some polyamory, there's some, roommates that you sleep with sometimes. There's all kinds of, I have a lot of different friends who are in all kinds of different arrangements, so if that's something that she's open to and that he would be interested in, get that out on the table early, certainly before you legally marry someone.